I wore a suit tonight. I didn't wear the $1 sweater like I did the last time from Kohl's, although I think the from Kohl's, the press has asked me for the suits from Joseph A. Banks. I doubt the presumptive nominee for the other party's ever been to Kohl's before, let alone shopped in the last 18 or 20 years, but...
Well, that was Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker branding himself as the everyman who shops at Kohl's and Joseph A. Banks while labeling Hillary Clinton as out of touch. Governor Walker was one of nearly 20 potential Republican candidates attending a summit in New Hampshire this past weekend. Some media outlets described him as a breakout star there. He sat down with me earlier today. Governor, great to see you.
Great to be with you.
So already the great advertising for those two companies, by the way. I hope they send you some sort of a free sweater, something.
Well, I got the last one for $1 in Manchester, so that's pretty close.
It's savvy shopping. But obviously you're trying to paint her as out of touch. And already we're hearing that not just from you, but from regular folks. But what is the evidence of that?
Well, I think you look at a whole pattern of things out there, even the way she reacted to the emails. I mean, I think the fact instead of saying, hey, this was a mistake, it was almost like when she stood in front of the UN and talked about this, like she couldn't believe that she actually had to respond to that. When you look at saying you were dead broke when you came out of the White House, when she had a book deal pending and 2 houses out there, when she talked about not having driven for 18 years, I think those are all things that everyday people really wonder, what is this that they're talking about? This is not someone who's connected with everyday Americans.
How does it differ, though, from what we saw the Democrats do to Mitt Romney last time around, where he got hit for being too rich and some said out of touch?
Mitt Romney didn't say, hey, I'm relatable to everyday Americans. His argument was, hey, I ran things, I turned things around. That's legitimate for criticism. If people are willing to run on...
Republicans came to his defense last time around and said, don't hit him for his wealth. That's the American dream. He made it. He pulled himself up. And, I mean, he had obviously a successful father as well, but he's a successful businessman, and we shouldn't be hitting political candidates for their success.
Well, in the end, I think the biggest, most compelling argument against the Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, is to talk about how she embodies Washington. It's not just being out of touch from everyday Americans. She lives there. She worked there for President Obama for 4 years, Secretary of State. She served there in the United States Senate. She lived there in the White House. She started her career there in Washington. She embodies Washington.
Now, your latest approval ratings in the state out of the poll that we just saw today are down. They're down, I think 41% say they approve, 56% say they don't approve. But more concerning to some Republican voters may be the fact that she's beating you in your own state, 52-40, according to that latest poll. Why should people believe that you could win the general nomination if you according to these polls today, couldn't win Wisconsin over Hillary?
Yeah, every 2 years in the state of Wisconsin, not just for me, but for previous governors, when a budget's out and the media is focusing on the handful of things that people disagree with, poll numbers are always down for a governor. In the end, I had poll numbers that were in the mid-30s 4 years ago at this time in Wisconsin. I was called by Time magazine Dead Man Walker. And when people actually saw the positive results of how our reforms worked, how property taxes went down for the first time in 12 years, we not only won the recall election a year and a half later, we won with a bigger margin than we did the first time. Polls are important snapshots, but in the end, the only poll that matters is on election day. We've proven 3 times in 4 years in a state that hasn't gone Republican for president that we can win by talking about transferring power from the big government special interest to the hardworking taxpayers, and that'll happen again here.
Dead Man Walker, you got to give him points for being clever with the words. It's not bad. All right, so you speak about experience and you speak about inside D.C. and obviously you're outside of D.C. and that's one of the appeals that some of these Republican governors may have in getting into this presidential race. Do you think that it's a deal breaker to be a one-term senator and vying for this nomination?
No, I think there's some good people in the race, but I just, when people say a governor, foreign policy, how do you lift up to that? So in my lifetime, the best president when it comes to foreign policy was a governor from California. In my lifetime, the worst president when it comes to foreign policy was a freshman senator from Illinois. So I don't buy into this belief that on foreign or even on fiscal or economic policy, that one size fits all, that there's a perfect mindset. What I think people want more than just a title, whether you're a governor, senator, or anybody else, is they want someone with a proven track record of someone who fights and who wins for the hardworking taxpayers.
All right, well, let's talk about that, because at this summit this past weekend, it was interesting to listen to these Republicans vying for the heart and soul of the party and talking about which way do they go to win not just a nomination, but to win the general election, which is what the GOP wants. Do we have to be more conservative? They said, well, maybe. Do we have to appeal to the moderates? Well, maybe. And you had a different take where you said conservatives don't need to change to win. You said you don't win the center by running to the center. You win the center by leading, which is a nice catchphrase, right? But what does it mean? How do you actually persuade the center by leading when the policies are more right-wing?
Well, you have to look people straight in the eye and tell them what you're going to do. I think most independents aren't independents because they're mushy moderates out there. They're independents because they've been burned before. Someone has told them on either side of the aisle what they were going to do and then did just the opposite or didn't do anything at all. What we found in ours, and this isn't just a theory. Again, we've won 3 times in a state that hasn't gone Republican for president since '84 with almost universal support amongst Republicans, 96%. That's almost every Republican out there. And yet that's not enough to win in my state. I had to carry independents by more than 11 percentage points. And how did we do it? We told them exactly what we were going to do, and then we went out and did it. They knew that they didn't agree with us on every single issue, but they said, this guy who stood up against 100,000 protesters and didn't back down on the issues I agree with him on, he's not going to back down. And I think Americans now more than ever, that's what they want out of their leaders.
And now some of your critics say you've shifted your positions politically to try to be more appealing. For example, on immigration, you admit you flipped and got a little bit more hardline on that. And Common Core, too, it was in existence in Wisconsin for a year, and you didn't do much about it.
Well, in the case of both, Common Core is a good example. It wasn't on my radar screen when I ran in 2010, nor most people out there. It wasn't until just a couple of years ago when parents, teachers, concerned citizens came to us, pointed out what was happening, something that happened before we came to Wisconsin that we saw happening around the country. And we said, no, we want standards that are set by our local school boards. So we pushed legislation to change that. When it comes to immigration, as a governor, I don't have any direct role in that. But having talked to border state governors, having talked to other people and seeing how screwed up immigration has become under this president, it was clear to me, talking to them, looking at this issue, traveling to the border, actually going there with the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, seeing the problems here. Yeah, from my standpoint going forward, we need to secure the border. We need to enforce the laws that we currently have through an effective E-Verify system.
You're more in line with other Republican candidates on this. They're pretty much all in line.
Well, the other thing, but the one thing they're not saying is the other part of it is we need to make sure that as part of that, any future legal immigration system goes forward has to account for American citizens and the workers of this country and their wages to make sure that even with legal immigration, we respond to it in a way that doesn't take jobs away from hardworking Americans.
Last question. Joseph A. Bank?
Yeah. Another one in the shirt I think is probably from Kohl's as well.
I'm going to check a tag before you leave.
You got to get your Kohl's cash out. I mean, that's how you get a sweater for $1. You go to get all the discounts, and when you get out there, you pull out the Kohl's cash, and you get a pretty good deal.
While you're here in New York, you should go down to Century 21, where it's the same type of deal. Designer at a discount.
Not a bad deal.
See you there.
Thanks.
Governor, great to see you.
Good to be with you, too.